Today on the podcast, I spoke with Melinda Tankard-Reist, an incredible podcast. We dived into the depths of pornography and the impact, global impact that is having, especially on women, exploitation and promoting a culture that really dehumanizes them. And we spoke a lot about men and boys as well and how they're being groomed by the sex industry online to consume porn and live out these fantasies and the impact that's having on women, on family, on culture. So I hope you enjoy this 45 minutes with Melinda Tankard-Reist. All right, welcome to the Leadership Lessons podcast. Our guest today is Melinda Tankard-Reist. Melinda is an author, speaker, media commentator, blogger, and advocate for young people, an amazing woman. It's a real pleasure to have her. She's best known for her work looking into the harms of pornography, sexual exploitation, trafficking and violence against women. A few years ago, I was privileged to host an event where Melinda was the speaker, and we've stayed in touch, and I've enjoyed watching your progress, Melinda, since then. So welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for your interest in the issues and for having me on, Caleb. It's good to see you again.
That's great. So tell us, Melinda, what is it like being a leader, being an advocate in the what I might call the sex space in our country of Australia? What is that like? It's a very unique role that you have.
It's funny you asked me that because I actually don't think of myself as a leader so much. I'm part of a collective of remarkable people who lead the charge against sexualization of children, objectification, porn harms, porn culture. And I said this to a girlfriend once. She called me a leader, and I said, I don't think of myself as a leader. She said, look over your shoulder. Look over your shoulder. So then I thought, okay, maybe. But for me, I just do what I love, and people have followed. I've always pursued issues since I was 16 years old. I've always felt to use my work, my writing, to expose issues that, in my view, weren't getting enough attention, especially issues affecting women and girls. And, I've just published my 7th book, and my books are on the lived experience of women and girls. So I've just done what I've loved, pursued my passions. I could say, I think the word calling or vocation, and people have followed, and I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful that thousands of people are now part of Collective Shout that is expanding globally. But I never sort of set myself up as a leader. I just did what I loved, and people kind of turned up,
Fantastic. Well, if you consider that a leader is an influencer, I think you're having an amazing influence. So tell us about Collective Shout. What is that, and what is the impact that that's having?
So Collective Shout is 12 years old, and we came about as a result of my 3rd book, which I'm about to show you, Getting Real, Challenging the Sexualization of Girls. And this book was published, what year? I've got to remind myself. It came out in, I should have worked this out, 2009. And when the book came out, one of the contributors wrote to me and said, this book is a collective shout against the pornification of culture. And I love that phrase so much. It sort of leapt out at me, and I thought I need an excuse to use that phrase. And people were wanting to know what they could do about the sexualization of girls. The global research was solid on the harms, mental health problems, low self-esteem, self-harm, depression, anxiety, poor academic performance. But people were contacting me and saying, well, okay, the research is there. You've gathered it all in this book, but where's the movement against it? And then this contributor wrote to me, and I thought, I need an excuse to use those words. I'm going to start a movement. And I contacted some like-minded women who were all on board, and we launched 12 years ago. And since then, we've had multiple victories. In 2021 alone, we had 20 victories. 7 of those were global, one against a multi-trillion-dollar corporation. So that's a little bit of the history. We're a grassroots campaigning movement, and we equip people to take action, to take up their rightful place in the public square and say, we didn't say this was okay. We didn't say it was okay to sexualize children. We didn't say it was okay to expose kids to rape porn, torture porn, sadism porn, and incest. We didn't say it was okay to put sexual slogans on little girls' clothing or to pose them and style them in sexual ways on TikTok and Instagram for the enjoyment of millions of men. We didn't say this was okay. And so that's why Collective Shout started. And a lot of people say that we make them feel less lonely because before they thought, is it just me? Is it just me that hates porn culture and the sexualization of everything? Pornified displays of women in the shopping centre, etc. And we help them to see, well, actually, no, it's not just you, and that we need to act collectively, politically, to reform this, to change it, to bring about cultural change and social transformation. It's one thing to not like it and complain about it, but why not join the global protest against these unacceptable behaviours?
So porn, sex, the right to have sex with who I want, as I want, to be a certain type of person as I'm having sex. Like all of these things are so idolized in our culture. It's really seen as a human right. It's a huge enemy that I suppose you're coming up against. Do you sense that as you are fighting for this cause? Do you sense the how systemic this is in
Yeah,
our
it's
culture?
definitely an enemy, but I actually don't even think this is about sex, to be honest with you. This is about extreme torture, violence, degradation, entitlement. This is beyond my right to sex. In fact, I think this is actually anti-sex, certainly healthy sexuality.
Mm.
Men masturbating day and night to torture porn isn't about sex. Whereas it's about ejaculation and masturbation and getting off on extreme violation of women. I don't think that's actually sex, to be honest
Mm.
with you.
So you're really fighting the unhealthy side of sex, and
We're
then
actually
the
fighting a global
consequences.
predatory industry which is grooming boys and men to into a sense of entitlement, to devalue the humanity of women. It's really about the erosion of the humanity of an entire generation. We've seen this play out with the Knox grammar examples just the last couple of days, where even a seasoned crime reporter with the Daily Telegraph said this was the most shocking content he'd seen in
Mm.
years of reporting crime. We are having boys threatening to rape mothers and sisters of girls if the girls don't send them nudes. These are stories I've heard just in the last 2 weeks. Rape as entertainment. Girls expecting boys to choke them. Boys expecting to choke and strangle girls. Female teachers being called the C word every day and not allowed to suspend. Girls being sexually groaned and moaned at every day, including year 5s and 6 girls in Christian schools. So I don't even think this is about the distortion of healthy sexuality. Healthy sexuality. In my opinion, this abusive industry of exploitation is colonizing every area of our lives. And we're seeing the fruits of that now. We're seeing the
Yeah.
fruits of it, especially in our young people. So this isn't about being anti-sex. It's actually quite the opposite. I mean, I went to Sexpo in Sydney for 4 days, which is the peak event of the Australian sex industry. It's a sex industry trade fair. It's
Yeah.
it's and it was the most degrading, debased, commercialized, commodified, industrialized version of sexuality. So I don't even remember your original
So
question.
how
It
do
was
you
very
deal?
good.
So
Got
how do
me
you
going
deal?
now, Caleb.
Yeah, how do you
Hey,
deal with it, Melinda? Because a lot of people,
yeah.
I'm sure, would just take the position that, well, you're just anti-sex, or maybe you're just conservative, or maybe you just don't understand people's sexual needs and desires. How do you find that's an obstacle? Do you come up against that even in the media,
I
or
come up against it, but I don't care. I mean, these are people with vested interests. These are men who want to get off on anything they want. So their right to enjoy the degradation of women trumps human empathy, right?
mm,
So those men I don't respect their position. I don't respect that argument because I know what's driving it, their sense of entitlement to enjoy the filmed sexual abuse of women on a global scale. Then there's an industry, which of course it's a PR spin. They want to say all of those things because they need to groom the next generation of porn consumers. That's their business model, right?
Mm.
So of course they're going to say that. I don't care. I mean, Paul Keating used to say, the dogs may bark, but the caravan rolls on, so the dogs are barking at the wheels. You just keep rolling on. And here's the other thing that I remind myself of. If myself, my colleagues, our global partners weren't having an impact, why would they go after us? Why would they threaten us with death, with rape, malign us, spread rumors about us, slander us, defame us, troll us, threaten us online? If we weren't having an impact, why would they bother doing that?
So where
So
are you getting most of your cut through at the moment? Where's most of the impact happening at the
there's
moment?
cut through politically and there's cut through personally. So the political cut through, a prime example of that is that PornHub, the biggest porn dispenser, the biggest dispenser of misogyny and women hatred in the world, has been called to account. So PornHub is owned by MindGeek, which is headquartered in Canada. And PornHub, as a result of a global campaign, was called before the Canadian Parliament's Ethics Committee to give account for trafficking underage images and videos of girls,
Mm.
of rape and torture and violation and non-consensual image sharing, also known as image-based abuse. And they had to give account for that. And now a whole lot of the executives have resigned. We've had major credit card companies pull out of processing transactions, PornHub transactions. And that's had massive attention. I mean, the New York Times has reported on it. And now there is civil actions by women used in that industry and harmed in that industry. Civil actions now against PornHub. So that's probably the
It's huge.
biggest response that I've seen in my years of writing and researching this issue. So that's encouraging.
It's really good. It's really good.
What's
So
also encouraging, yeah,
Pornhub, from what I understand, has been the biggest internet website for a long time.
yeah,
It's been one of the top, and obviously searches for pornography, I think most of us would know is the top searches on the internet. So you're
yeah,
really hitting at the top of the pile there, something that probably was considered untouchable for a
yes,
long
they
time.
were untouchable for a very long time. And now they're not untouchable, mainly because of one woman who led this charge, Layla Micklethwaite in the US, who led this charge and has been unrelenting and so brave. And then millions of people signing a petition to bring PornHub to account. So that's on the global level. Also, we're seeing rolled out in more countries proof of age protections, an age verification system to stop children, well, at least to put one obstacle in the way of children seeing rape porn, torture porn, sadism, incest, etc. So we've been pushing for that in Australia. The eSafety Commission was tasked by the previous government to come up with a plan, a roadmap to roll out a proof of age protection system. That report, the eSafety's report, is meant to come out at the end of this year. So we're awaiting to see, will it be a solid system? Will it be taken seriously? Or will the vested interests of the sex industry prevail because they don't want any restrictions at
Yeah.
all?
So
So that's
when
on
I
a
was
political level. But personally, we're seeing more young people rejecting the scripts of porn for their lives. We're
okay,
seeing more young people saying, we don't want our relationships harmed and distorted by the dictates of the porn industry, the scripts of the porn industry. And some of the growing movements against porn are being made up of young people. And to me, that's where the hope lies.
yes,
We've failed. Our generation has completely failed. But the younger generation, every young person that rejects porn is a victory and a cultural tipping point.
brilliant, brilliant. So why in Australia are we what I would consider pretty slow on the
Mhm.
uptake with the issues of porn. I
Mm,
know when I was just a young man, my early 20s, I used to run a youth group in my church,
mm,
and
mm,
I would talk about this all the time with young people, really
mm,
advocate against it.
mm,
But it just as I got older and understood more about politics and culture, and it was just
mhm,
shocking to me that there was some really easy solutions. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe in the UK, when you plug internet into your house, you actually have to opt in for pornography rather than it's already automatically
mhm,
streamed, like simple
mhm,
things that could be done at a federal level like that, just to stop the issues of pornography just coming to young children, really. Where, as I understand it, again, you're much
mm,
more of an expert than I am, but
mm,
most by 11 or 12, almost
mm,
100% of children have
mm.
seen pornography
Yes,
because it's readily available on the internet, which is coming into basically every home. So why are
that's
we
right.
so slow in realizing this as a country as a problem?
Well, the kids don't even have to be looking for porn. Porn finds them. A child can be searching for their favorite cartoon character, and favorite cartoon characters have triple X hardcore porn sites named after them. This is very deliberate. It's
Mm,
very deliberate. We talk about accidental exposure, but there is deliberate exposure as well. Also, the kids don't have to be going to porn sites to see porn. It's all over their social media. It's on
yeah,
TikTok. It's on Instagram. On TikTok, there's entire genres that depict girls being strangled, being choked, being covered in bruises, because this is what young people think sex is now, because they've learned it. The porn industry has taught them this. So they're being preyed on. If they're online, they're being preyed on and groomed. It's as simple as that. Why are we so slow? Well, the sex industry is very powerful. It has lots of money. Anytime there's been efforts to rein in the internet, including under a previous Labor government, the sex industry brings out all its forces. It threatens to expose male users of its industry who are in politics. It. I was in Parliament House when the entire internet operating system of Parliament was shut down by groups who didn't want any regulation of online content, which the then Communications Minister Steve Conroy was pushing for. They disabled the parliamentary operating system. They also bombarded parliamentarians' emails with hardcore porn. They have a lot of power, and politicians are scared to confront that industry.
mm,
Also, there's this, idea about so-called freedom and civil liberties and the right to view anything you want. That should not be an unreined Wild West, approach here. Why should you be allowed to view and consume and enjoy the torture of women or the violation of children? So, as a society, surely we should find common ground here on this. But as I said, follow the money trail. The money will always explain where the power is, and that's what's happened. We did get action from the previous government at last after a long campaign. We just don't want that plan to be derailed by vested interests under the new government.
yeah. And so let's dive into your book. You've written a book
Mm,
just this year, so your seventh book. He chose porn over me. Women
mhm,
harmed by men who use porn. I read it over the last couple of days. Um, yeah, fantastic book in the sense of I think it really gets to the heart of the issue, and very very
mhm,
sad to hear
mm,
that there's any stories out there
mhm,
like described in this book. And the book is full of women's stories
mhm.
about pornography and how that's really poisoned their life and their marriages and their family, their home, everything. Yeah, it's really, really sad. Tell us a bit about the book. Why did you put it together? What are you hoping to achieve?
Well, thanks for asking about the book. And this is the book for anyone interested. He chose porn over me, women harmed by men who use porn. And this book came about really, the momentum came about at the end of last year. I shared a story of a young woman who had just called off her marriage, her wedding, because she discovered her fiance had kept his habitual compulsive porn use from her. And she called off the wedding. I posted on this, and all these women started to comment and say, I wish I'd called off my wedding. I wish I wasn't in this relationship. I wish I'd seen the red flags, the warning signs. I wish I'd heeded the advice, don't, or heard the advice, don't date men who use porn. And I thought, wow, I think there's a book here. I think these stories need to be told. So the 25 women in this book describe what it's like to live with a habitual porn consuming man, how porn colonized their union, their families, their homes, seeped into every aspect of their lives, changed the way the partner acted towards them, how the women felt inadequate, devalued, never good enough. They couldn't compete with the women used in pornography. They experienced a total lack of respect for boundaries, an overblown sense of entitlement, and an expectation that they would provide sex on demand, including acts they found degrading and demeaning. How difficult it was to be in a relationship with a man who's just drowning in porn and who chooses porn over her, his sense of entitlement, sexual ownership, the sexual violence experienced by the women. So I situate porn consumption as an element in the perpetration of domestic abuse and domestic violence, because these men carried out physical, mental, financial, verbal, emotional,
Yeah,
and spiritual violence on women. So it's intended as a warning to young women: don't date men who use porn. It's
yeah,
also intended as permission giving for women who feel they need to sacrifice their lives, who have sacrificed their lives already. Why should you have to do that? These
yeah.
men are
It's
not
really good.
worthy of you, and you're allowed to get out.
Yeah, it's excellent, and I think that's really hit me in the book, the fact that um, porn use or porn abuse or porn addiction or whatever is tied to a whole range of other issues. Again, in our
Mhm,
culture, I think there's a really unhealthy separation of sex and what
mhm,
people's right to have sex. And it's separated away from all the other aspects of life, almost like it's this untouchable right,
mhm,
and it's separate and it's an urge, and everyone should have the right to fulfill their sexual fantasies. But the book did a really good job of bringing together, well, actually, that so-called right or the need for a man in this sense to fulfill their sexual fantasies, it actually does have an emotional, financial, spiritual, relational impact. Like that, you can't untie the two. Like they
mhm,
go together. And I thought for me, the lying really hit me. Like if there's compulsive porn use,
mhm,
there's guaranteed compulsive lying.
mhm,
Like the
mhm.
two go together. And I think that's a
Yeah,
dead giveaway of the problem of porn. If it needs to be lied about and
yeah.
covered, then obviously that straight away suggests that there's an issue. So anyone saying that it's okay,
Mm,
it's foolish. Well, why is it so needed to be covered up? Why do men lie about it in that sense if
mm,
it's so healthy and normal and what have you? So
mm. Yep, yep. Compulsive. That's a good line. Compulsive porn use, compulsive lying. Uh, that's definitely how the women felt, and then they were gaslit by the broader society. There's a victim blaming model here. Even though the women have experienced this systematic abuse for years, they're told by broader porn culture and society, well, this is liberating, empowering. You should consume porn with him. This will be good for your relationship. They're also told by their therapists, so-called therapists and counselors, oh, just loosen up a bit. You're just prudish. You're just hung up. All men do this. It's not his issue. It's your issue. You've got to give him more sex. You've got to be available 24/7. You've got to meet all of his sexual needs, which are the equivalent of air and food and water, you know.
yeah,
And so the therapeutic industry feeds into his entitlement. Worse, in my view, is the complicity of the Christian church. Some of the
yeah,
worst stories were from Christian women, and how they were gaslit within their own churches by so-called church leaders who told them they had to stay. They couldn't break the marriage. They couldn't break their vows, even though he has broken his vows for years and years, neglected her, emotionally abused her, used her sexually, used women in the sex industry at the same time as presenting his happy family life, being able to stay in the family home, goes to church every week, keeps the family, intact at the entire cost of her, at the entire cost of herself and her well-being. There's women in the book who are still in those relationships. They broke my heart the most.
can you tell
Because
me a bit more about the statistics about the church and Christianity? That's my space. I'm really interested to know, is the problem similar inside the church, outside? Is it, yeah,
I can only go by one survey that I was privy to, and I'm not even allowed to say the denomination that did this survey because the results are under lock and key and will never be released publicly because they were so shocking. So a major denomination did a survey of its church staff, anyone employed by the church, so senior leaders, youth ministers, anyone in a paid church staff role, and found that regular use was approaching 80%. Now, how do Christian leaders who are consuming porn themselves tell the world what it should do? And how will they help a victim of porn fueled abuse and violence if it's infected their faith communities?
Yeah.
So many women of faith have contacted me over this, and basically they're being gaslit and they're being given a false view, a false idea. They know it's wrong. They feel sick. They feel repulsed. It's a violation of their conscience, but they are made to feel that the responsibility is on them. And meanwhile, he's not held to account. He's not made transparent. He gets to enjoy the family life, family home. So he doesn't have to take it seriously. This is an abuse issue more than it is an addiction issue. And that may sound controversial. But if he's not serious if the user isn't serious about getting help and taking every measure possible to reform and change, I don't think she is bound to stay there.
Yeah. It's a real difficulty I could see with Christians in the church because there's this very strong moral law, if you like, in the Christian faith of no divorce. So you got that sitting on one side of the coin. And then how does pornography, which is not a first century type issue, digital pornography, 2,000 years ago, it didn't exist. So it's not explicitly stated in the Bible or these kind of things. How does pornography fit into the Christian sexual ethic? And I think that's part of the problem. And you're right, Melinda, that if leaders are struggling with it themselves, then obviously they're going to be far less confident to talk about it or to help people. If they're not admitting their own struggles, then how are they going to help people who are struggling? So you've got a number of ingredients there that are just going to create a lack of voice and a lack of fairness in dealing with the issue. So it's a really big problem that you've rightly.
So they're normalising intimate partner violence, really, and validating it by not being strong enough on it, or blaming the woman over and over again. So that has to change. And I won't be popular for saying this, but I've never been in a popularity contest. This needs to be reformed at every level, and surely the Christian church should be leading the way here. Like, seriously, why? Where is the point of differentiation? This is my question. This is consuming me right now. I go to faith-based schools and the stories are as bad as anywhere I hear anywhere else. Why is that? Why? I want to know why that is, because I don't understand it. Why do I have when I ask the question to grades 5s and 6s, how many of you have been sexually groaned at school and moaned at? They all put their hands up. How often does this happen? Every day, they say. When did it start? From grade 2, they'll say.
Wow.
Why is this happening in faith-based schools? I don't understand it. These schools have become crime scenes if they don't act on this. Why are female teachers allowed to be sexually harassed and propositioned, always consuming porn in the classroom, at the school camp, on the school bus, everywhere? Why is this being tolerated? I don't understand. It's an absolute mystery to me, and this breaks my heart the most, is the lack of differentiation. I've been in tears over it every day, particularly the last month, because the stories have become worse. Christian girls in Christian schools, grade 7, year 7, telling me that boys offer them cash to make porn films with them and their mates. Year 7 boys.
It's horrible.
Telling girls, if you don't send me a naked picture, I'm going to rape and murder your mother and your sisters. And 3 girls saying that those images were sent because they thought they were saving the lives of their mothers and sisters. and they were in faith-based schools.
Yeah, wow. No, it's really sickening, and I really appreciate that people like yourself are bringing light to the
Mm,
reality of these things. Because I think the stories are so powerful, like the stories in the book, even what you're
mm,
talking about, real young ladies in schools
mm,
and their real experiences. Because I think the normalization in culture is such a problem, so therefore these things are belittled or
that's
you
right.
know kind of seen as maybe they're not even true. I think the faith-based issue in schools and churches, it is such a problem because obviously a lot of people's problem who aren't Christians in culture is the fact that
Mm,
they see church or Christianity as hypocritical, and
mm,
so this is just another thing where there's can be the judgment, I suppose, of hypocrisy, which is a problem.
mm,
But I would say, in defence of that, if I may, to the other side, is that
mm.
the point of churches isn't to produce perfect people. The point
No,
of churches is actually to embrace broken people. And so it's not about us being perfect in the church, but it's about us being honest.
that's right.
So I think honest that I have a porn issue, that's what the church is about. It's not
Mm,
about no one has a porn issue.
mm,
So, and I think faith based schools, in my experience, have actually been a place of slightly better, I would say, safety um, for kids against sexual exploitation and what have you. But I'm
mm,
sure my experience is not the normal experience, and it's great to hear you shedding
mm,
light on that because Christian schools should be the place leading the charge. But the
mm,
culture is so strong, and you talk in the book a lot about normalization of pornography. I don't know if you could talk to us because I think for me that was probably a key point. It was like it's very hard to fight something that no one can see because
mm,
it's normalized.
mhm,
It's the water that we swim in. It's so natural to us that when
mm,
someone says, "Hey, porn is wrong," it's like, really?
mm,
Like
mm.
I was just watching a movie during the week, Melinda. I was actually shocked. It's a new release movie. It's got Mark Wahlberg in it and Kevin Hart, and it wasn't not a particularly dirty or sexualized movie. It's kind of about dads my age with kids, and there's this scene in it where he's watching porn, and his wife and child actually walk into the room, and Kevin Hart is there just about to watch pornography. He's Googled it
Yeah.
in his computer. And the mother kind of grabs the child and pulls her out of the room and says, "Oh, sorry, sorry," and just backs away as if like this was your time on your own. Oops, would you give me some space to watch
Sorry
your
for
porn?
invading your privacy.
Exactly. And I was like, there is the issue because it's
Yeah,
just
it
said
is.
to us through
Mm,
Hollywood and all these different streams that it's just a
that's
normal
right.
part of life. So my question for you, Melinda, is how do you fight something that's not seen by a lot of
So I want to
people?
go back a step. One is to say that I'm grateful to the faith-based schools that have us in because it's a risky subject to talk about. So
Mm,
even though I have lamented the lack of differentiation and the fact that these horrible stories are happening everywhere, including in those schools, I am very, very grateful to the faith-based schools that have been having us in and have taken that risk and have been brave and said we need to confront this. So I do want to say that because I am very thankful to those schools. When you say it's not seen, it needs to be seen. Like open your eyes, look at what's going on, look at the pornification of culture, how porn has really colonized the entire society, and the data, the research, the evidence. This is not just my opinion. Everything I'm saying is backed by the global evidence, the global research that porn normalizes rape myths, that porn teaches boys that no means yes,
mm,
that boys who consume porn, young men who consume porn, are more likely to engage in acts of sexual harassment and sexual assault. The evidence is really solid on this. There was an Our Watch report on porn violence in young people that came out, I think it was last year. And that's a peak body. That's a government agency now that is saying what some of us have been saying for more than 10 years. So, you know, get with the program. This is what the evidence says. This is what
mm,
we're seeing. Child on child sexual assault at rates never before seen. The latest data on sexual assaults in Australia found that not only has sexual assaults increased in the last decade, but 61% of all sexual assault in this country is committed on young people under 18. 61% under
Wow.
18. We're seeing more adolescent boys in global sexual assault statistics at rates never before seen since we've been measuring sexual assault. And we know how underreported sexual assault is. So the real figures that would actually be much, much higher. You know, in my view, this may sound exaggerated, but this is the conclusion I've come to. We are breeding a generation of sociopaths. We're seeing this with the Knox grammar example and so many others. Because we haven't intervened, we haven't fulfilled our obligations to protect and nurture our children. Boys are not born like this, but we have caused them to be brutal, to be cruel, to be callous. We've knocked the empathy out of boys from the moment they are born. And the kind, soft-hearted, compassionate, empathetic boys get smashed in this culture. So I met a young man at a youth group recently who told me that 5 boys held him down when he was 13 years old and showed him, trigger warning for anyone listening, murder porn. He was 13. He didn't want to see it. Boys held him down and showed him that. We are driving the empathy out of an entire generation. What does that mean for civilization? This is, to me, the question of the day, the loss of empathy. A teacher told me a chilling story. She said that all of her students, including the younger ones, had seen the live streaming suicide of a man on Facebook. You might remember this a couple of years ago. A man took his life live. These kids had all seen it. They were all talking about it. She said more shocking than the fact they'd all seen it, she said, was the lack of affect. The lack of affect. They weren't that affected by it because violence is just another meme. It's just another trending video. And then you move on to the next one. You know, bear in mind, these children have seen ISIS beheadings, decapitations. They've seen anti-Semitic content, as per this Knox Grammar private chat group, celebrating Adolf Hitler, like celebrating the genocide of millions of people. Where do you go after that? When the Ukraine war started, the most commonly searched for search term was Ukrainian girl. Entire brothels set up constituting Ukrainian women.
Wow.
There were Reddit threads of men asking where they could see the live rapes of Ukrainian women. This is the question, what kind of society do we want? What kind of civilization do we want? If we are driving the empathy out of children, if boys at Knox can ask, why wasn't I invited to the gang rape party? If rape is seen as entertainment and these boys are sharing and enjoying child sexual exploitation material and saying that they want to be pedophiles and rape children, what is left for us as humanity? Serious question. Can you answer that for me, Pastor Caleb?
Well, it's a great question, and we're so ahistorical as a culture at the moment. We don't respect the past very much because we think that we're the smartest people that have ever lived, and we assume that everything that is good is things that are new or in the future. And I think if you look back at a lot of cultures and civilizations through human history, like this kind of sexual conduct in a culture, it really rots it from the inside out and essentially brings that civilization to an end. It's not like we haven't been here before in the human race, but our inability to learn from the past is it's just mind-blowing because you're spot on, Melinda. This is not the kind of young people that are going to continue to create a culture of do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. The rights of the poor and the marginalized, equal rights for men and women. Like, this is not the kind of culture that we're going to see in the future if this is at the core of it. And what really bothers me, Melinda, is the fact that, like, I think it's horrible what you're talking about, but I also do feel for the young men or the young boys in this sense because they barely get a chance. Like if you've had pornography shoved in your face at 8 or your older brother watches it and shows you or whatever, like I've talked to a lot of young men, and obviously the first time or the early days of seeing pornography, there's this natural disgust. No young boy at 8 or 12 watches that and goes, oh, this is fantastic. There's this natural disgust because it's wrong. In the depths of our conscience and our moral radar, it tells us there's something not right here. But there's also this other side of our brain that says, I'm a little bit fascinated, I'm a little bit
Mm-hmm.
interested, I wouldn't
Yep.
maybe mind seeing a little bit more. And as we know, people quickly becomes normalized, and
Mm-hmm.
the disgusting nature of it
Mm-hmm.
is, I suppose, trumped by the fascination of women and sexuality. But how does a young man, for instance, if we're just talking about men or women in this case, but it seems to affect men more. How do you have a
Mm-hmm.
chance when that's been shoved
They
in your
don't have a
face?
chance at all.
And then all of
They
your
don't have
friends
a
have
chance.
seen it, and then they're all talking about it, and then your
Yeah.
dad talks about it and makes jokes
Yeah.
about women anyway. Like,
That's
you
right.
got no chance. So it is a cultural issue, because you can't
Yeah.
expect a boy at 18 who's been watching hardcore porn for a
Yeah.
decade and doesn't know any different to
That's
all of a
right.
sudden grow a moral conscience and
No,
change himself. Like, it's very
that's
difficult.
exactly right. That's exactly right. They don't stand a chance, and we've allowed this to happen. This is a giant experiment on the healthy sexual development of young people, and we've let it happen, and we should be grieved over that. We should be in tears every day. We should be begging forgiveness of every young person in our lives. More girls are telling me now that they want nothing to do with boys, nothing to do with it,
Yeah,
nothing to do with it. They turn into relationships with other girls. They are describing themselves as celibate, and they're not coming from a religious viewpoint at all. But what is on
yeah,
offer is so repellent and so disgusting. How will these young men be able to form long term, healthy, intimate relationships when porn is their primary sex educator? It's
yeah.
impossible. It's
Impossible.
impossible. They can't do it. And we've allowed it to happen. It's not really their fault.
Yeah. So maybe the last few minutes, Melinda, I was
Yeah.
really interested to ask you
We
how.
should have saved those hopeful things I said an hour ago to the end, really, because I brought the mood
That's been
right down again.
fantastic, very insightful. I could talk about this all day with you, but how have you seen? Maybe let's just talk about men. But how have
Mm,
you seen men get out of porn addiction, and how could a man listening to this podcast, if he
mm,
wanted to change,
mm,
change? What really hit me in the book, I think it was great. There's a
mm.
chapter or a line that says he sets the he sets the terms,
Yeah,
she does all the work. So what you were saying there is that
yeah,
he basically plays by his own rules, and
that's
then if
right.
there's going to be a change in the man,
Mm,
it's the wife going and finding a counselor, the wife finding accountability software for phones and
right.
computers, and then he kind of is difficult and argues with it and plays along a little, but probably still has porn on the side. I thought that was really well defined, because that's a problem I see a lot in my work
Yep,
as a pastor.
yep.
Wives are making phone calls, wives are talking to me saying, "Can you help my husband?" But I
That's
always
right.
say to the wives, well, look, at the end of the day, only the person can change himself. Only the man in this situation can change himself. God can't.
That's
A
right.
wife can't. I can't.
That's right.
But how have you seen men change, and what causes them to change? And is there any hope? Of
I have to believe there's hope, or I couldn't get out of bed and do this work every day. But there
course.
are days where I just do despair, and I've had some of those the last few days. So radical change, radical action, taking every measure. Some men have destroyed their devices. Some men don't go online at all.
Yeah.
It's not safe. The wife shouldn't have to police this. I hate this idea that the wife needs to set up the accountability software, police it,
Horrible.
make sure he's okay, check in, set up all the appointments. That's unfair on her. This is not her role. More men seemed inclined to seek change when she actually says, "That's it, I'm out of here. I'm not going to
Yeah.
endure this anymore." They're less likely to change if she's compliant and trying to help him and support him through this. He's got to show he's serious. If he's serious, he will take extreme measures to get free. So, accountability software that she doesn't have to manage, online recovery programs, better face to face. So, communities like yours,
Yeah.
face to face accountability, answering to someone, accountability software. So, you have a buddy system where someone else is advised of where you're going online.
Yeah.
A radical commitment to change, to reform, not to be pandered to, not to be, you know, they've got to show they're serious, is what I'm saying. And there's a great piece on my website, melindatankardt.com, and on collectiveshout.org by a man we call James Evans from the UK, and it's called Why We Need to De-Radicalise Boys from Porn. James was exposed at 10 or 11, became free of it in his mid-30s. Long time. Such a long time. And what made him change was that he was about to commit crimes. And he pulled back at the last minute, and he said he had to completely rebuild his ethical framework. He had to completely rebuild the way he saw women and retrain himself with very hard work. Other men I've spoken to, what compelled them, including young men, was they said they heard me speak, and I had said in my speech, if you are consuming porn, you've become a patron of a global industry that is trafficking in women. You're part of this problem. Every download is leading to the sale, the trade in women and girls in the sex industry, including the production of pornography. And those who still had a conscience and a heart, that hit them hard. And they recognized they didn't want to be a patron of this industry. They didn't want to support this industry. And that was often a turning point for them. But it takes, it's going to take really, really hard work. And they've got to show this. They've got to show they're serious and be held accountable.
Yes.
Yeah. So I've met some, but not enough. Not enough.
Yeah, I think I think a big problem that I see and hear a lot is that I suppose it's difficult, and I'm trying, and it's hard, and also the fact that maybe I have a mental illness. Like maybe you could talk to that, because I think that that's a really weak excuse that people are trying to put it in the category of a mental illness, and then men want to change, but they don't want to give up the internet. It's like saying I'm an alcoholic who used to beat my wife, but I still want to go and hang out at the pub.
Yes.
It's like, well, it's not. You can control that. You can not go to the pub. You can not be around alcohol. You can not have it in the house. But there's this thing of like, well, I need to have the internet, but I'm going to try really hard not to watch something. Or maybe the excuse of, it's a mental illness, I can't really control it, I need other people to, could you talk to that?
Yes. So are you talking about sex addiction as being so-called sex addiction being part of that?
Well, how do you, for you, like, how do you diagnose this husband or this man in the book you're talking about as, what's his problem? Is it a mental illness that he can't control, he was born with? Or
I think that's degrading, and I think that's insulting, because what it does, it takes away moral agency, and we all still have moral agency. We still make choices, right? Yeah. So I have a section in the book which explores language and the use of the term sex addiction. I prefer compulsive porn use or habitual porn consumption or problematic sexual behaviors. The terminology of sex addiction is actually contested. Now, I quote, and I recommend you have a look at this, a blog post called Hiding Behind Sex Addiction by Lundy Bancroft, who had an influence on this book, actually. It's February 2022. He says, men who abuse their partners are seizing on the latest excuse and running off to bed with it, sex addiction. Yes, suddenly lots and lots of abusers are declaring that they aren't perpetrators, they're victims. They say they're trapped in an addiction, helpless over their behavior, driven by a deep compulsion that is beyond their control. They don't deserve criticism. They deserve compassion, understanding, and help. What this man is calling sexual addiction is actually the fact that he sees the women he has sex with and the ones he dreams of having sex with as objects. They're things to him, not people. It doesn't make any sense to call something an addiction that was completely unethical and selfish from the very beginning. And even in cases where the man may genuinely be a sex addict, which isn't common among cases I've dealt with, he's still an abuser too. That abusiveness is going to show itself in other aspects of how he treats women in relationships, and it will show up in his treatment of past partners, such as his efforts to destroy the reputations of his exes who are blowing the whistle on him. And one of the contributors to my book, Tash, says, don't let him get away with calling it an addiction. My ex was happy to label himself an addict. He liked labels that he could use to excuse his unethical, selfish, and self-serving behavior he chose it's an excuse, a way to play the victim.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I just put that out there for consideration. We still all have moral agency. We're still responsible for our decisions and our choices. That is not taken away from us.
Yeah. I think you've really nailed the problem there, and it's great. I think the book really hits on a lot of the key issues and excuses, which I think is really important, because I think, like any, I mean, we all wrestle with our own lies, don't we? Like
Absolutely.
if you've got any sense of self-awareness, we know that we lie to ourselves a lot, and I think the book does a great job with this porn issue of going, look, these are a lot of the common lies that are designed to be a smokescreen, and this is how. But this is where people need. It's sad, but we need education in this area.
Yes.
To be able to navigate the lies, and especially for women, I think, to support them and guide them through, empower them to navigate the lies and to be able to see the red flags and not have to live with it. But I imagine it's very hard, and that's why you wanted to write the book or put these stories together, because it could be hard to see the truth, see the red flags, see what's normal, what's not normal, and all of our little lives, our little marriages, and whatever they're very narrow, and you need objective third party help to guide you through these things. It was sad to hear that some of that third party help, psychologists and counselors and pastors and what have you, is often not very supportive of the woman, which must be another big frustration for you.
Yes, absolutely. I was on a panel recording a couple of days ago that's going to be shown at the Global Summit to End Sexual Exploitation, and in November. And one of the women I was on the panel with said, who's part of trauma recovery programs for women who have been harmed, said, not one addiction recovery counsellor told me I'd been abused. When she recognised she was a victim of abuse, that's when she started to change and get the help that she needed. So, yeah, I would really like to read the conclusion to the book, which might be a nice way to end if that's where you're heading.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, let's.
Yeah. At the last paragraph of the book says, of the introduction to the book, says, I hope this book will help women demand higher standards in relationships, be more discerning, recognize the signs, and turn away from men who consume porn, and that, more broadly, individuals who value intimacy, connection, mutuality, empathy, and compassion, to quote Robert Jensen, the emotions that make stable, decent human communities possible, will endeavour to protect these essential qualities from being devoured by the global porn industry. So that's the ultimate aim here, that we reject porn's scripts, porn's colonisation of our lives, and demand something real and better and far superior for human well-being and flourishing individually and as a collective society.
Fantastic. Could you maybe, as we finish as well, we talk a bit about leadership on this podcast, and I think you're a great leader, Melinda, because you're having a great influence over the journey. What is maybe one of the biggest lessons that you've learned as a leader, as an influencer, as an advocate, a lobbyist, whatever you want to call yourself? What's one of your biggest lessons?
I think just pressing on regardless, trying to ignore the haters and the trolls and those who want to destroy you personally and destroy your work, and just pressing on every day. Finding sources of hope as well, because you can get pretty low, pretty despondent. As my colleagues and I say, we're staring into the abyss every day so that others don't have to, and we're exposing what's there. So that does take a toll on your well-being, emotional health, definitely your soul, the erosion of your soul, you feel it. So if I spend too much time in the abyss, then I really do suffer. So I have to remind myself of hope. I read the feedback from young people. Just in the last week, 3 girls wrote to me about the life-changing impact of hearing this message, standing up for themselves. I'm allowed to say no. I'm allowed to act according to my values and my boundaries. Young men writing to us as well. So thankful for this message, recognizing they need to be upstanders and not bystanders, that they can call out this behavior, that they can act according to their integrity and their conscience, and not go along with the pack, this pack mentality, this mob mentality, like we see with the Knox grammar example, the pack mentality, which expresses itself in hate, power, misogyny, racism, sexism, as my friend Andrew Lyons in the Right Journey described it. So those are places of hope for me.
It's great.
So they would be the two things, pressing on and just reminding yourself that it's not all over yet, and seeing the global uprising, the global resistance to the porn industry and other harmful industries that erode the humanity of women, especially, and of all of us ultimately.
Brilliant. Well, truth will always emerge in the end, and we appreciate your great work for standing up for the truth, and what you're doing is an important value and principle that we should all be living by, having a voice, speaking against exploitation, all of these things. So really appreciate you having you on the podcast.
Thank you.
I wish we had more time, and maybe we get another chance to talk about it, but you're on a tour at the moment all over the place, which is great. I love how you get into schools, get in at the grassroots level, because I think that is such a great strategy for change at the grassroots level. So thank you very much for coming on today.
My pleasure, Caleb. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk about this issue at length. I'm very grateful for your involvement and your concern and your own leadership in your faith community on this issue.
Thank you.
I trust you were impacted by that Leadership Lessons podcast. I would love to hear your thoughts about today's podcast. Please comment down below, and please review the podcast and share it with a friend. Doing this inspires us and helps others to find the podcast. See you next time.